I can only speak to the Chambers County, Texas population in the early 70s, the one I worked with most intensively. That animal was on the east side of Galveston Bay. And Galveston Bay and the Houston metropolitan area separated the wild canids that were along the coast west of Galveston Bay from those east of Galveston Bay. In other words, there was minimal gene flow between those populations. As they were originally described long ago, far before I got involved, they were given different subspecies status. The ones east of Galveston Bay, where I worked intensively, were Canis rufus gregoryi. The ones west of Galveston Bay, Canis rufus rufus. And the latter were consistently smaller and more coyote-like than the ones east of Galveston Bay. My interpretation of that is that even by the early 20th century, coyotes had begun to hybridize with those west of Galveston Bay earlier and to a greater extent, and that pulled the average size down to where they were even originally described as a different subspecies than the larger red wolves to the east. So if you check a fairly detailed map of Chambers County, Texas, where the Anahuac Wildlife Refuge is, you'll see that the west side of Chambers County is Galveston Bay. So what was happening there was minimal opportunity for gene flow between populations of wolves or wolf-like animals east and west of Galveston Bay. Because if you go north of Galveston Bay, then you run into the Houston metropolitan area. There was very little opportunity for them to move through all that mess in order to disperse and mate with the others on the other side. So what the Galveston Bay and that Houston complex probably did was it actually helped stain the animals east of Galveston Bay in a more pure form. I'm quite sure that the Canis rufus rufus resulted from an earlier hybridization with coyotes. And there were some behavioral differences that we discovered as well as some genetic differences. So they were much more coyote-like than the animals east of Galveston Bay. We discovered foxes and coyotes have a threat expression if they're cornered and frightened, and they gape. That is, they open the mouth extremely wide. Now, gray wolves don't do that. They can snarl, but they don't gape. And I knew this was true with gray wolves compared with coyotes. Coyotes gape, gray wolves don't. So, okay, what do red wolves do? What I found at the time was the red wolves that were east of Galveston Bay, with one exception, it was obviously a hybrid, but all the others that I had captured, handled, released, they threatened with a snarl, not a gape. But the ones from west of Galveston Bay, where they were smaller and more coyote-like just in appearance, they would threaten with a gape. And it just so happened I had a behavioral geneticist on my doctoral committee who worked with coyotes and wolves a lot. And he picked up on that very quickly and did a little bit of genetic experiment with his captive populations. And he found out that the ability to gape was inherited very simple. It's very simple Mendelian genetics. At least that was his idea at the time. So it was under genetic control. So we demonstrated a genetic difference as well as a behavioral difference between east and west of Galveston Bay.